Hey guys, welcome back to more Karen stories. In this video, a racist dumb Karen confiscated my baby because of his skin color, claiming that I cannot be the real parent. Let's dive right into the video. So I was sitting on the park bench one day with my son. We would always go on Thursdays during the local farmers market here in Manila, Philippines. I grew up here and know all the good restaurants and eateries, but there's something about the farmers markets that I love. It's a lively little place where one can get fresh food and various fruits and veggies. When I was playing with my son on the bench, I noticed a tall, frail woman nearby pointing in my direction. She had a thick accent, it was American, and other people near her were distracted by the commotion she was giving off. I sensed a weird vibe from the get-go, and as I laughed and played with my son while feeding him mashed fruit, I noticed that she started to inch her way closer to me while still pointing. Another man was behind her, maybe it was her husband or something, but eventually he trailed off and disappeared in the crowd. She looked around for him and stood there staring at me for the longest time. My son finished his meal and wanted me to rub his belly like always, and I was getting a little perturbed by the woman staring at me. Her sunglasses and long flowy dress made her stand out and look a bit snooty. I moved to another bench so that my back was to her and giggled and played with my son as he moved his arms around and reached up towards me. Apparently though, this woman snuck closer to me as my back was turned and seated herself right behind me. While I was making silly faces and my son was enjoying the attention, this entitled snooty Karen did not. She reaches over the park bench and hammers off some hateful words as she put her hands on my son. I thought for a minute that she was maybe a little cocky, like maybe she had a mental disorder that made her not make good decisions, but in a heartbeat I knew, once she put her hand on my son, that she was fully aware and knew exactly what she was doing here. I brushed it off though at first, thinking that maybe she was just crazy, and she took her hand back and adjusted her wide brim hat. Well, then she proceeds to come sit down next to me and lecture me on how I am not the father of that child and that there's no way that boy is yours, because I'm from a different race or something. So granted, I did live in the Philippines and I was white, my whole family lives here and my wife is Asian. So our little boy was mixed, but that did not stop me from batting an eyelash at this racist Karen who claimed that my boy was not my own. She got up for a minute and went into the crowd, causing a commotion again and pointing at me. Some people thought she was nuts, while others continued to play along with her little rants. I see that you're white and you have this little boy here. Well, he is not yours, I can tell. I know some of you around here are child snatchers and buyers. You hand that baby over to me, I'm confiscating this poor child. I honestly couldn't believe the outright ridiculousness that ensued. So this woman was basically claiming that I was trafficking my own kid because I was white and my baby was Asian. Some onlookers were getting startled as this Karen laid claim after claim on me, saying, "That's not your baby," and "I will be forced to call Child Protection Services or even the cops on you." I even pulled out my phone and showed her pictures of my child and me playing in our backyard, spending time together. I was so in shock that I waited on this park bench and the upset and angry Karen reached out for my child as onlookers stared in disbelief. She starts making more commotion and claims that I'm really a child trafficker because I look guilty for just sitting there. An older Asian couple walks up to the Karen and says, "Ma'am, can we help you?" They look at her with disbelief as she grabs my child from my arms and starts screaming. "I've had enough of all you people in this town taking babies and thinking you can get away with this. I've seen the horrendous things you've done and I'm not tolerating it anymore." I'm livid at this point and grab my son from her. She lunges at me and gets in my face. I tell her to back off. She keeps going at me with hateful words. The crowded park gets even more crowded as people start yelling and chanting at the woman and me. The angry Karen naps my son again and scratches me on my face and arm, causing it to bleed. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" I scream at her and hold my baby back to protect him from her crazy antics. This just really got out of hand so much that the older Asian couple called the police. They came up to me and told me, while the Karen is still screaming at me, that I have seen her before and that they have observed her hateful ways. Eventually, the police showed up. The Karen has gone completely off the rails and embarked on a hatred campaign of grand proportions. The police do their due diligence and get a report from me and the Asian couple, then after calming the Karen down, she gives them a report too. I could tell that they were not buying it. I showed to the cops that I was the father with photos and videos. My wife, who happened to be meeting me later that day, arrived earlier after a bystander saw her in her car near the park. She immediately ran over to us and saw the ruckus. They then ended up arresting the Karen that day on charges of assault, attempted kidnapping, and making false accusations to law enforcement. The Karen ended up with a plea deal and went to court. Under trial, she pleaded guilty to attempted kidnapping if they wiped out her assault charge. Although I was a bit aggravated at the jury's outcome, I knew she would be in jail for a while, since there were multiple witnesses and this was not the first time it happened. I can happily say though that my baby boy is fine and we live a peaceful life now, frequenting the park and farmers market to this day. I'm a bit shaken up by it all, but I'm grateful that I'm alive and that my boy is safe. I'm also glad the court gave her a restraining order, so if I ever see her again at the park, I know swift justice will prevail. And the next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for telling my daughter she cannot marry a racist? And by the way, if you enjoyed the story so far, please don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel because that would help me tremendously. Thank you so much. Some background: my wife and I worked and lived in a somewhat larger city where my daughter was born. My wife got a job opportunity in one of her employer's field offices and it was too good to pass up. We moved to the boonies when my daughter, Amy, was a preteen and we have been here ever since. The people are nice, but we were quickly labeled as city folk and so we never really integrated very well. So anyway, Amy came back the summer between her freshman and sophomore year. She got a summer job, which is where she met her fiancé Dan. We've had him over to the house countless times since then and he is polite, respectful, and he seems to truly love my daughter. He is a local and his family have been locals for generations. We rarely met up with his parents, but they also seemed nice when we did. They dated long distance all through her college years and this past summer they got engaged. His parents decided to throw an engagement last weekend at their house. We had never been there and I was excited to see the home where he grew up and meet his extended family. The party was fine, we did our best to fit in, but like I mentioned, we were from the city and they poked fun a little bit. His dad gave a speech and while it was not overtly racist, he mentioned how he was happy that his son found a nice white girl and looking forward to white grandbabies. As the night progressed, they started to share bits of family history so that we would know the proud lineage our family would now be a part of. Without going into too much detail, they are descended from members of a hate group. We decided to be polite and not say anything, but we did not stay much longer. I let this stew for a few days until Amy returned home. She tells me that she was not aware of his family history, but it doesn't change her mind. I don't want her marrying into this family and I told her so. She says Dan does not wholly believe what his parents do, but I'm not convinced. You cannot be raised to believe that you are of a superior race and not have it become internalized to some degree. She assures me that they have a lifetime for her to point out all the ways his parents are wrong, but I'm worried that if they never leave his hometown, there will be too much pushback from his family. I told her that I'm gonna be firm on this, that I don't want her marrying into that family. She called me an a-hole and has been ignoring me ever since. I feel horrible, but this is not what I had hoped for. So Reddit, is she right? Am I being an a-hole? And here, ripe stars, let me know in the comments what you think about this. Do you think OP is being actually the a-hole here, or do you think she is doing the right thing by pointing out that her daughter should not be marrying into this family? Let me know what you think in the comments. And now we have an update. It goes like this. So a lot has happened the past few weeks, so I thought I would share. Not long after I posted, Amy came to me to apologize. I was surprised because based on the responses I was getting, I was preparing to apologize to her. She said she lashed out because she was trying to reconcile her relationship as she knew it with the new information about who he was. I asked her if she really had no idea and she said that, looking back, there were warning signs but nothing that would lead her to believe that he was overtly racist. I guess being long distance and liking him so much allowed her to remain mostly ignorant. She wanted to know what she should do and I told her that I was gonna try to talk to Dan and try to get a beat on who he is apart from his parents, and she seemed to think that was a good idea. A lot of people here said that I was being unfair labeling him a racist before, but now that we have spoken I can tell you for certain that he is a racist. A lot of you were trying to figure out what Amy meant by him not being wholly racist, and I think I can answer that now. He told me that he does not harbor any hatred for anyone, but it is always the but, guys. It is always the but. But he believes the white race will go extinct eventually, and he is proud of who he is and of his race and that he doesn't want that to happen. Which I guess also explains his father's comment about white grandbabies. I told him that his heritage is nothing to be proud of and that his beliefs will have no place in our family or in my household. He said that Amy seemed to understand him and that I might not have a choice of whether or not his beliefs will be a part of my family. I said that he was right. If Amy wants to move forward with the wedding, then there is nothing I can do to stop her. He sneered and told me that he supposed we had nothing more to discuss, and that was the end of it. I told Amy what me and him discussed, and she decided to call it all off. She broke up with him and he has not taken too kindly to it. He has been to the house a lot, so we decided to get her an apartment back in the city. Her work is gonna start phasing back into the office anyway, so the timing works out. His parents called us and came to speak with us a few times. At first they were just trying to figure out what was going on, but it quickly turned into them berating us. I got some Reddit flack for not standing up to them initially, so this time I made sure that they knew where I stood. And the next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for not knowing a term that someone called me is racist? I, 34 male, am a consultant and was hired by a mid-sized company for a contract that requires a meeting about once a week in office. These are usually lunch meetings. Recently, after we were done eating, I was chatting with one of the team members, Jen, and I yawned. I excused myself and said something like, "Damn, I shouldn't have loaded up on carbs just now." And Jen laughed and then yawned herself. A few people noticed this and we all had a lame little chuckle over it. Another team member in the room, Alice, says to both of us, "Damn, it looks like you two have the itis." Jen went wide-eyed, but I guess I must have looked puzzled because, well, I was. I did not know what that meant, so Alice goes at me and says, "I know you're not pretending you don't know what the itis is." I simply told her, "I'm not and I don't." Alice rolls her eyes and starts to say something, and then Jen cuts her off and says, "What's wrong with you?" Alice just walked out of the room and Jen apologized to me on Alice's behalf. Another guy, Dan, then explained that that term is rooted in racism and alludes to a stereotype of laziness associated with African Americans. Now I am even more dumbfounded because I cannot imagine what would possess Alice to say this to us. If she wanted to call us both lazy for yawning after lunch, she could have put it any number of ways. Alice and Jen are both black and I am white, which I guess does matter to the story. Anyway, Alice returns and comes at me, calling me a racist and saying that I should not be here. I did not say anything. Dan and Jen and another guy, Pete, came to my defense and told Alice that not only did I not do/say anything racist, but I barely said anything at all and that they didn't know what her problem was. She swears that she's right and I'm racist and then got close up in my face and yelled at me that it is my responsibility to be familiar with all racist terms so I can speak up if I hear one, and says that she was testing me and I failed. She said that I should have known what that meant and stood up for Jen. Alice is petite and I'm a big dude, so I felt it would be prudent to create some distance and backed away. She continued about how I'm the worst and eventually left the room again. She did not return and it was all so nuts we decided to break for the day. Days after, I got a call from the HR team telling me someone reported the incident and that they had some questions. I answered everything honestly and they said that it matched up with what they had heard and that Alice would suffer consequences. They apologized and offered me a paid out of my contract, but I really like working with them and I told them so and said if you're game to continue then so am I. They were happy and then we hung up. And well, it turns out Alice's consequences were that she was demoted/reassigned and she is saying on social media that a racist man got her kicked off her team at work. It does not make any sense, but I do feel guilty. So Reddit, am I the a-hole for this? And yeah, Ripe Stars, let me know in the comments whether you think OP was being racist here or if this was all just a super strange situation. I'm curious what you think about it. By the way, some clarifications. We are in the Northeast. I was born and raised here, but I don't know where the rest of them are from. If I had to guess, I would say Jen was raised here too, but I'm not sure. I have no idea about Alice or the rest of them. I did not go to HR. I don't even work at their company. I'm just a consultant on a shortish term contract. I'm there once a week maximum. After the day was over, I went home and didn't say anything to anyone except my own friends and family. I have not seen her social media firsthand as I don't follow Alice or any of my clients and teams. Someone showed me screenshots of her Instagram story rants from the weekend. In Alice's kind of defense, she might not mean me when she says a racist man got her kicked off her team. She could know who went to HR and be talking about that person. I was hesitant to include it in the original post for fear of being rejected and booted, but since some commenters knew or have researched and guessed, what Dan specifically pointed out when explaining the itis racist roots was that it had stemmed from N-worditis, and Jen confirmed. Update to the story, motivation mystery solved, maybe kind of. Thank you to all who commented and told me that I was not in fact being a crazy racist. It's more appreciated than I can articulate right now. And by the way, Ripe Stars, maybe it's because of me not being a native speaker, but even after all these explanations, I still have no clue what this itis part means. However, then again, maybe it's better if you don't explain it in the comments, because maybe YouTube will give me some trouble or whatever. Either way, I had an off-the-record talk with the big boss last Monday and learned that Alice generally behaves as if she's the boss of the entire team I'm working with, by the way she's not, and believed that she would/should also be in charge of this project. She was apparently stunned and subsequently furious when her boss decided to bring in a consultant, aka me, to spearhead it. He actually apologized for not apprising me of that before we commenced. In my initial post, I mentioned that one of the things Alice said while yelling at me was that I should not be here, which was sort of out of place, but I didn't think anything of it in the moment. Now it makes sense though. I'm not gonna make any assumptions or judgments as to her performance and expertise. I have no idea if she deserves the title / to be in charge of the project or not. In the few meetings we had, she basically said nothing, which I took as her just being shy, quiet or whatever, but I guess it was because she hated the idea of me being there. Also, despite me having a policy not to really drink or socialize at all with current clients and teams outside of office meetings, I ended up having a drink with both Jen and Dan the other night. I think I just really wanted to get all the way to the bottom of this and put it away for good. They confirmed that Alice has generally been very bossy and acts like she is in charge, but nobody understands why, as she was the last person hired to the team. The reason Jen cut Alice off when she went to yell at me the first time was because Jen knew Alice was looking to start drama and took Alice saying to me, "Don't pretend you know what the itis is," as Alice implying that I'm racist myself and that I was feigning ignorance about what it meant. Evidently, Alice has tried a similar brand of crap stirring before, and it pisses Jen off, as Jen has worked in what she says were horrifically racist and sexist environments in the past, and this job is not one. So she really feels sensitive to the idea of starting drama where there isn't any. The impression I get is that aside from general work annoyances, everyone really is happy there, but then again, I'm only there once a week, so what the hell do I know? I have no new info on Alice. Anyway, that's the whole story, and I guess this is all over now. I cannot thank everyone enough for your thoughts and opinions. And now let's move on to the next story. It starts like this. I should start by saying that this story is not mine, but actually something that happened to my grandfather. I felt that it was worth sharing his story now as a way to honor his memory following his recent funeral. Rest in peace, old man. I was too young to appreciate him until it was too late, but will always have his wonderful stories. While he may have only appeared to be an ordinary man, this goes to show that you should never underestimate a war veteran. So the year was 1946, and after spending the last few years deep in the trenches of France, my grandpa, now known as Captain Ice for his cool under-pressure attitude, was preparing to return home to Great Britain. Following the end of the war, he had been stationed at the border to maintain the peace, watching in envy until his was the last unit to leave. At this point, he had not met my grandma yet and had no family to speak of, but he owned a small farm in the countryside that he was looking forward to getting back to. He had quite a surprise to return to the area, finding it heaving with new houses and roads everywhere he looked. Houses covered whole fields like they were the crop of the season. While he was a little saddened to see his village change so much in his absence, he knew at the very least his farm would be a happy sight. Navigating the concrete maze, he turned the corner again and again, stopping several times to consult his paper map, certainly now outdated. By his reckoning, he was standing on the farm now, but all he saw was houses, houses and more houses. After a frustrating couple more attempts, he stopped to ask a passerby, only to hear, "That decrepit old farm was torn down last July. It's all houses now. You like it?" He gritted his teeth against the remark and set off to find the ones responsible for the destruction. His first stop after the unpleasant discovery was the town wall, which luckily was the same building as he remembered. The reception was quiet, with little signs of life to speak of. Approaching the desk, it took a few minutes to rouse the attention of a lady from the back room to answer him. After my grandpa explained the situation, the lady audibly gasped. After finding no records of my address in her filing cabinet, she left his query on hold while she talked with the supervisor. An hour later, she returned with a death certificate shockingly marked with my grandfather's name. In their absence, the town council had pronounced his death and then made quick use of the space. Whether by mistake or a scrupulous councillor, they wasted no time in seizing his farm and demolishing it, making way for a housing boom sweeping the nation. But that left my grandfather in quite a predicament. With no home to speak of, no family, and little money to his name, he was left homeless. The receptionist, as kind as she was similarly stumped on the issue and had no solution that she could give. What she did do was promise to file the query to the higher-ups and I would be contacted with news soon. 2 weeks of couch surfing and sleeping rough passed by without so much as a whisper of news. He wanted to wait, believing they were doing their best, but after 2 weeks it had become too much. He returned to the town hall to find a different receptionist flooded with concerned citizens crowding around her desk. He could do nothing else but join the queue. When he did finally get to speak, he found the receptionist was oblivious to his request and after searching had no record of it at all. This struck him quite odd as he signed the form himself and saw the receptionist file it away. He gave way to a flash of anger and demanded to speak to the supervisor again, who luckily remembered him. In the confines of their office, they explained that his matter was reviewed and closed last week, excusing the fate that no one had even bothered to tell him. The supervisor was cold and very matter-of-fact as they explained the legal processes. My grandfather had lost his farm on a technicality and the town did not owe him a penny for it. Stuck in a situation that neither side wanted to be in, my grandpa insisted on a meeting to discuss the issue more seriously, which was arranged after much reluctance. He was told to sit in the waiting room and wait he did as hours flew by until he called into a small office that same afternoon. Inside he saw the earlier supervisor and the newly introduced chairman of the town council. The meeting immediately turned into what felt like an interrogation, as my grandfather was subjected to a lot of skepticism and apathy. The councillors wanted to first prove his identity and ownership of the land, which, when it was verified, their requests became more and more menial. It was clear at the time that they were looking for any excuse to discredit or ignore his claim, happy to put him under as much pressure or ridicule necessary to scare him off. My grandpa, on the other hand, had other plans, staying strong and meeting all their requests with composure. Rather than give in and admit defeat, the councillors regretfully informed my grandpa that as his death certificate was not amended within the time period, he legally lost rights to his lands and property. He argued his case that he would have done that had he known about it and not been fighting a war at the time. Though they looked unsympathetic to his answer, my grandpa was forced to leave the meeting empty-handed, hearing sighs of relief from the office behind him. My grandpa, who was still effectively homeless during this time, was not about to let them slide this under the rug. He visited the town hall every day to ask the same questions and chase up the same outcome. After each attempt, he soon realized the people that were meant to be helping him gradually found him more of an annoyance, turning his case into one that they wanted to ignore even more. On his 10th day, he found a police car parked outside waiting for him, who prevented him from entering the building. The men were sincerely more understanding to his situation, but they still had a job to do. They were called about harassment, stalking, and intimidation, all of which were false, of course. While they were giving him a lecture, he noticed over their shoulders there were figures poking through the blinds of their offices, watching them closely. My grandfather knew these men for what they were: spineless, cruel cowards. These were petty attempts to keep him out of the town hall, to keep him quiet and out of the way. Resilient as my grandpa was, he was not about to take this kind of treatment from anyone, so if the town council wanted a war, by God, he would give them war. Everything so far had been done discreetly. The authorities wanted to keep him quiet, even threatening him with the police to ensure his silence. So it made sense. The first thing he had to do was the one thing they wanted to avoid: taking it public and loud. My grandfather chose the busiest day and time to visit the town hall and personally hand them the lawsuit, complete with a speech that left him escorted off the premises, where he continued to draw crowds. His lawyer said the councillors wanted another meeting to discuss his settlement privately, no doubt to keep the case quiet, but my grandfather ignored their plea. The next time he saw them, he was suited up in court, ready to fight for his home once more. He found the legal procedures long and the loopholes tedious, but after weeks of trials, it finally came to an end with a clear winner. And finally, the town council was ordered to pay the full value of the farm plus emotional damages to a total of £4,000, which would be £200,000 today. While the victory was bittersweet, my grandfather was able to use that money to move towns, start a new farm and meet my grandma. His darkest days were behind him now, but he would always be a soldier. And yeah guys, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. And also check out my podcast by searching for Ripe Stories on Spotify, Amazon, Audible and other podcast platforms. You will often find exclusive episodes and early access to new content. Furthermore, please check out my Patreon by going to patreon.com/ripeyoutube or my YouTube membership program for even more exclusive stories. Thank you so much and I will see you again tomorrow.